Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so in this lesson we are going to start implementing Thunk and finally start interacting with our API backend. Okay, so the API backend that we are going to use is going to be this to-do backend and then the Laravel technology. Okay, so this is our backend, and remember, if you haven't seen the video, go back to the previous videos. I've talked about this to-do backend. Even if you Google for it, you will find a lot of different technologies implementing it. So yeah, we might as well just utilize it, right? So this is going to be our endpoint. Okay, now let's go back to our editor. First thing I'm going to do is go to my terminal and I will say yarn add Axios and Redux Thunk. Okay, so these are going to be our libraries. Axios is the HTTP client we're going to utilize. Okay, and then we need to make a couple of changes. We'll go back to our index file where we configure the store. We will require apply middleware from Redux, and then we will say import, and we need Thunk from React Redux that we just downloaded. Okay, and then here we will apply the middleware. Okay, and we'll pass Thunk there. Okay, invalid number of arguments expected 0. It looks like we've got an error, and this is not React Redux but rather Redux Thunk. I'm sure you guys saw that, right? And there we go, everything should be okay. So if we go to our browser, yep, everything is back to normal, so that's cool. Okay, so now that we've got Thunk integrated, we need a service class. Okay, we can directly use Axios, the HTTP client, but having a separate service class helps us in lots of different ways. The first one is obviously we're not tightly coupled to a particular implementation. So for example, in this case, it's Axios. Let's say that, in the future, somebody wants to use fetch. Now he needs to find all these different points in the application where the Axios is being used and need to rework the logic, right? Secondly, it's very hard to test. So what we will do is we'll create a service class like a good developer, and we can abstract that implementation away, right? So in the root of the project, and let's create libs folder, and then I'll say API service.js. Okay, so if you see here, I've got a libs folder and the API service, and then I will import the Axios from Axios, and this is going to be a very simple wrapper class, nothing fancy. So I'll say API service. Okay, and we're going to have a constructor, and all this constructor is going to do is assign a property on this class and instantiate Axios, right? So this dot API is equal to, or this dot service, whatever you call it, Axios dot create. Base URL would be, if we come back, and this is going to be our endpoint, right? So lovely. So that's our base URL. Let's just configure some of the headers. I'll say content type is application JSON except application JSON. Okay, so we've got our constructor. First endpoint that we are going to utilize is going to be the list of to-dos, right? Fetch list of to-dos. Okay, it will accept an endpoint, and then this is going to be an async function. Okay, and that means we will say const response is equal to, and then we will say await this dot API If you're not sure about what async and await means, I'm sure you can do a bit of a research on it. But what it really means is that when you specify it like this, it's like a promise, okay? And beside it, this is just a better way of writing promises, okay? So this .api .get, and we will say endpoint, okay? And then we can say return await. Once we have response, then we can just return the data. And I think that should do it. Okay. Let's start implementing Thunk. So I'm going to create a new file in the root of the project called thunk.js. Okay. And we are going to have a few thunks or functions. That's why it's always a good idea to have a separate file. Okay. So the first one, or the first thunk we're going to have is const fetch list of to-dos. Okay, that's going to be a function, and it will have access to dispatch. Remember, it also has access to get state, and this is going to be an async function. Okay, and then here we'll have our try catch block. For now, I'm just going to catch the error and do nothing with it. Okay, so we will say that to-dos are API service, and I think we're not exporting the API service, right? So let's see, if we go back to let me export this service class, so export to default, and we will say new API service. Okay, so that we don't have to new up the class. And then in here we will say service API service. So there we go, that's been imported for us. And we will say fetch list of to-dos. Endpoint is going to be API. So that will give us to-dos. Once we have our to-dos, what do? Well, we just basically dispatch from here directly. And let's have a look. So if we look at our actions, this is the one that we need. So we will say fetch to-dos, and we will pass this to-dos. Okay, it will start making sense as we implement more and more thunks. Okay, but think about it. The component is going to call this function. It's going to communicate with the API, get the to-dos that we need, and then it will dispatch this action creator here. Okay, so that means that this is going to change because we don't need this static data anymore. Once we accept to-dos, we will just simply pass it on like this, and with any luck everything should work as expected, but not yet, because what we need to do is go back to our app.js, and here we were directly calling the action creator, but obviously now we need to be using Thunk, right? So we will say fetch list of to-dos, and if we go back and see if we, yeah, we need to export. Can I import this? Yep. Lovely. So we've got now, we can get rid of this action creator from the action itself, or the action file, and I can bring this up here. Okay. See, the only change we made was basically calling the Thunk, the function, from here rather than calling the action creator. Okay, so that means that if we go back to our browser with any luck, if we, okay, so request failed with the status of 404. So that means there's a problem with our API call. Let's go back to our editor. Let's see what's going on. Okay, so we've got an async dispatch, but there is no await. So that's the first thing, because if you specify that a function is going to be an async, then obviously we also need to make sure that, you know, we provide the await keyword, right? Let's go back. That seems to be wrong because it's trying to call the localhost API. So let's go back. Let's go to our API service class. So it's not picking this up. Oh, I think this is the problem, because this needs to be base URL as in capital, right? So let's, okay, that seems to have worked. There we go. Okay, so it took a little time, but now we've got these to-do items coming from here. Great. Okay, so I think we will finish our lesson here, and we will start implementing the other actions using the Redux. Okay, I'll see you guys in the next lesson.